Usually when I start these sessions, I try to make a good introduction, but it is very difficult to sort of make an introduction after the speech of His Excellency Minister Çavuşoğlu, so I'm going to dive right in. I know that we have limited time. Welcome to all of you. Toivo, I want to begin with you. The Minister Çavuşoğlu said there are no local conflicts, but I think one area of your expertise, what you're looking at, is the South Caucasus. For much of the world, it is regarded as a regional conflict. The minister said that one of the key ingredients when it comes to conflict resolution is trust. You have just come back from Yerevan. What's the atmosphere there like? You had a chance to speak with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Is there trust?
Well, that's a very important question indeed, and thank you very much for the Minister for this very enlightening speech. I think there is a real desire for peace, and there's a real opportunity for peace. But after 30 years of conflict, it takes a lot to build trust. And I believe that over the past year, the European Union has really engaged extensively with both Azerbaijan and Armenia to try to build that trust, but it takes a lot more to reach a comprehensive settlement. The sides have taken very serious strides since the ceasefire of 2020, but it will be important to continue this momentum. And in that context, the leadership is essential from both Yerevan and Baku. And a key element there will be not only to sign a peace treaty and to address all the other important elements that are being talked about, including also finding a solution for guarantees for the rights and security for Karabakh Armenians, but it will also be important to focus on the populations and the societies. So it's not just about having the leaders agree. It's all about bringing the populations and societies together. And that also requires a huge amount of leadership from the political top to set the tone for reconciliation and for forgetting about past wrongs and looking towards the future. This means encouraging both contacts between civil society representatives, contacts between businessmen, and to broaden this base. But this is again something that will not happen by itself. It is something that needs to be led from the top. And the European experience has of course shown that we had a ceasefire, we had peace treaties after 1945, but it took a lot of effort by the political leaderships to focus on that, to broaden that base and to bring the peoples of Europe together. And that is what we are also encouraging in the Armenia-Azerbaijan context right now, that is what has to be worked on from both Baku and from Yerevan, and to really get rid of this underlying mistrust, not only between the leaderships, but amongst the peoples. And that requires a change in rhetoric, that requires a different type of messaging coming from all sides to really build this base for a sustainable settlement, because we don't just want pieces of papers to be signed, we want a genuine change in the climate in the South Caucasus.
Raghida, I want to bring you in, sort of play off what Toivo said. He said it's really important to sort of build momentum. I want to ask you about Lebanon, because this is a country where you have an immense struggle to actually build momentum. A country has gone through a lot. political instability, economic crisis, COVID-19, the port blast of Beirut, which killed more than 200 people. Talk to us about the importance of the leadership in terms of getting the trust and sort of unbridging the gap between what Toivo said in terms of the government and the lower levels.
I would say,
You have to press that. Yeah.
thank you for asking me about Lebanon. I wasn't prepared to speak about Lebanon, but a couple of points only. The leadership is horrible. The leadership is corrupt, and the country deserves better. And the trouble is that Lebanon is not only infested by its the kind of leadership it has, it's also a victim of the geopolitics and the proxy wars, and above all, Iran's intervention on the side of Hezbollah. It is not, when you have a country like Iran having its own paramilitary forces working on its behalf in a country that is supposed to be sovereign, that is an absolute violation of sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the definition of integrity, the integrity of the territorial integrity needs to be addressed here. It's not about just choices and alliances. This is much more dangerous, because when the world is silent and does not object to a country juxtaposing its own interests through paramilitary forces, not only in Lebanon, but in Iraq and also in Syria, and then that is questionable, which also, if you allow me,
sure.
I'll just go into this conflict resolution formulas, the different formulas. For me, the JCPOA, that helped me say that in
Iran nuclear deal.
In the nuclear deal, I think this was the wrong way to approach a resolution of a conflict, and the nuclear issue. Why? Because the Europeans and the United States in particular, of course Russia and China as well, they all agreed to the condition that Iran will not be questioned about the drones and the missiles or its behavior regionally. This was agreed under the pretext that we really need to address the nuclear first, mm-hmm. and exclusively. And now, we see the price being paid by the countries who were victims of the Iranian behavior, but also we see the alliance, military alliance between Russia and Iran in the Ukraine, which is changing the formula, the calculation. And when a little later on, I want to speak a bit about the Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, we'll get into that, because I want to ask Burhanuddin Bey about the great deal, but let me just ask a quick follow-up. The reason why I asked you about Beirut is I kind of got the impression that you were going to have that assessment of the Lebanese leadership. Yeah. Take that and actually sort of magnify that onto the global stage. The world is experiencing many other problems. A food crisis, an energy crisis, a climate crisis. The list goes on and on. Talk to us about how effective leadership, effective diplomacy can actually help achieve progress when it comes to this.
When it comes to a case like Lebanon, you mean?
No, on a global scale now, because I wanted to make an introduction through Lebanon and actually magnify this onto a global stage now.
So the question is, one more time.
How do you actually get good leadership, good diplomacy to solve some of the world's problems in terms of food crisis, energy crisis, economic instability?
Right. Okay, well, I mean, I want to congratulate Turkey for being innovative in terms of addressing the food crisis and for the corridor, the grain corridor initiative. So that is innovation. That is going forward with diplomacy of a different kind. And a new type of diplomacy. I note what the foreign minister said, that it's needed to be multilateral in these efforts. So I take it that Turkey does not have in mind to be the sole broker of this relationship in its diplomacy. I take it that Turkey will not want to position itself as the sole broker, because that will bring a lot of problems, complications, complexes, like you addressed, Mr. Minister. So I think in this case, diplomacy has got to be multi-leveled and multilateral correctly, and sometimes it can't be at the level of presidents. For that, for example, in the case of the Ukraine right now, I think what a friend of mine calls, it's not only the conflict of the politicians about Ukraine. It's the conflict of the constitutions of both Russia and the Ukraine. So the aggression of Russia and the invasion of Russia of Ukraine has put us in a position right now that we need to think differently of diplomatic approaches, because it cannot be done at the level of the presidents. You need other levels. You need new ideas, such as, do you distinguish between a ceasefire and a search for conflict resolution, a peace treaty or a peace agreement? What are the stages to do this? How is this to be done? Who plays a role in that? The institutions like the United Nations can't do this. I mean, it's an archaic institution. It is outdated. If it had not been for Turkish leadership, the grain corridor couldn't have happened. I would stop here and I'll let you.
I actually want to get Burhanettin Bey into the conversation. Burhanettin Bey, the minister said that geography is destiny. Looking at Turkey, to the north side of us is Ukraine, both in Russia as well. Turkey finds itself in a unique position. Raghida said we need to think differently. Talk to us about how Turkey has thought differently in terms of its leadership, in terms of its diplomacy, in actually being the main architect of perhaps one of the most successful deals in recent years, and that is the Black Sea grain corridor deal.
Yeah, thank you, Ali Bey. Well, as our Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu stated very clearly, that Turkey has a unique place in this turbulent region, in our surrounding region. So through the time, and of course with the successful leadership of President Erdogan, Turkey has developed some significant capabilities to deal with the conflicts surrounding Turkey. Well, in a way, it's out of necessity, actually. Our minister said that geography is a destiny. Well, Turks, in a way, successfully dealt with this difficult geography. Well, for the shaping of global leadership, we need an actual, effective, genuine multilateralism, because our world is experiencing such a difficult time that in the future, after pandemics and this global transition to multilateralism, there will be more need for initiatives, leadership initiatives. And actually, we have to develop new understanding of leadership to deal with the coming problems, crises of the world. Because as we see, this great power competition is deepening, and this Ukrainian war is not just a war between Ukraine and Russia, it's about European security, and we have to rethink all security architectures at global and regional levels. So Turkey starts from such an understanding that we have to approach to world's conflicts in a new way that necessitates first understanding, genuine dialogue, and multilateralism.
One of the, I'm going to call it advantages that Minister Çavuşoğlu has, is that 1 second he can get on the phone with Sergei Lavrov, hang up, and actually call Dmitry Kuleba. Turkey is one of the only country within NATO that's able to talk to both sides. It puts it in a unique position. I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more in terms of what other countries, not only within our region, or this region, but around the world can actually take away from the position that Turkey has adopted.
Well, I was about to talk.
Sorry for interrupting.
It's the proper time, actually. Turkey's foreign policy provided a fertile ground for taking such an initiative, because Turkey established good relations at the same time with Ukraine and Russia. And this is not just about initiatives, leadership initiatives. You can do this. Some European countries actually, during this Ukrainian crisis, tried to be a broker, tried to be a mediator. But to build the trust, confidence on both sides is something that you should establish before this conflict. And that was Turkey did before. And actually, President Erdogan, with an expertise of 20 years and knowing 4 or 5 presidents or prime ministers from European countries, and also good relations with Putin, first developed a new kind of foreign policy. This is open to different sides and trying to have cooperation and competition at the same time. For example, since 2015, Turkey has developed a new kind of policy with Russia. We have problems in Syria, in Libya, but even in Nagorno-Karabakh, but at the same time, we have good relations on energy and trade and other issues. So we can negotiate, we can compete, and at the same time, President Erdogan can establish a trust. So you project this kind of foreign policy background into new initiatives when there is a crisis. It is the same with Ukraine. Both sides knew that Turkey is a trustable country, so can do the better thing for all the sides. So all this experience shows us that we have to develop new capabilities, new approaches to multilateralism and leadership at the same time. Yes, I know that it's not easy to have conflict management or conflict resolution for the coming conflicts in the world. But if there is no such brave global initiative from leaders, the new world would be full of many crises and conflicts that will shape our future, unfortunately, in a very negative way.
Like the minister said, conflict is perhaps inevitable, so it's how we deal with it. Toivo, let me come back to you. You were listening to Burhanettin Bey, and I know that you were taking some notes. Burhanettin Bey was talking about some of the new approaches in Turkey's foreign policy. When you look at sort of the South Caucasus region, these are countries that have historical ties, they have cultural ties, Turkey as well. How do you think Turkey's approach can actually play any role in the conflict here, not only in terms of resolution, but also crisis management and the steps ahead?
I think Turkey actually can and is playing a role and can play a much bigger role. Of course, Turkey is the biggest country in this region, and it therefore has a central role to play in sowing the seeds for a more prosperous, interconnected, peaceful South Caucasus. And of course, we have the contacts ongoing between Ankara and Yerevan. I've been meeting with both special envoys, Serdar Kilic and Ruben Rubinyan, over the past year. There have been some steps taken. We have reopening of the cargo trade. We have, I benefited from the fact that we can fly directly from Yerevan to Istanbul.
Yes.
And hopefully this will move forward. There will be also diplomatic relations opened in between Yerevan and Ankara. And in the context also of the special ties between Turkey and Azerbaijan, there is a huge amount of scope for Ankara to play a leading role in promoting this different kind, more peaceful and prosperous South Caucasus. Encourage the Turkish diplomacy, I believe, has a huge potential here in encouraging positive rhetoric that I was talking about, supporting concrete moves towards normalization, helping the sides to defuse tensions and to build more trust. And I also believe that there is a great deal of potential for the European Union also to work with Ankara in this regard. And of course, in the context of the World Cup, we should not forget the fact that in the upcoming year, we will have qualifying matches between Armenia and Turkey. And we have had football diplomacy in the past.
Yeah.
And I believe that this is, again, a possibility that should not be left unused. So again, there is, I think, for Turkey as the biggest country, as the central country in the region, I believe there's more and greater. Turkey has more potential and can do even more in fostering this different kind of South Caucasus, and we want to work together with Turkey in this regard.
I agree with you. The beautiful game can be used as sort of a shot on target when it comes to diplomacy. Raghida, let me turn to you. Burhanuddin Bey was talking about, as did you, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Toivo was talking about Armenia and Azerbaijan. These issues have all been dealt with at the highest levels at the United Nations. I was wondering if you can sort of maybe talk about what you think has been achieved, what has not been achieved, and how individual countries can actually play a different role.
First of all, I don't think the United Nations is able to play a role right now in this conflict on its own. It may be supportive.
I love your candidness.
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm known for. A bit too much sometimes, but it's good. So I said it is outdated, the approaches are outdated, and the leadership at the UN is rather weak these days, in particular. At any rate, it's the very structure of the UN that does not permit it independence of the Secretary General, of the different agencies. But I want to give you an idea as to what I'm talking about when I speak of different approaches to diplomacy. That's just, again, the issue between Russia and the Ukraine. Right now, as what I refer to as the conflict of constitutions, I meant by saying that is that it is practically impossible now to speak about a territorial settlement of the conflict, because they're stuck. Right now, this war is very costly and very scary. And it's also, it could be a pan-European war if things go wrong further. So people are talking...
Well, it has turned into one in other respects.
Yeah, indeed, in many respects. But I'm talking about the war that we don't want. So what am I hearing? I'm talking to different people from different parts of the world. I'm hearing there are approaches, for example, let us speak about security guarantees rather than territorial settlement. You can't start with a territorial settlement. This will have to be later. If you speak about security guarantees by which the Europeans would play a role, the United States, of course, Turkey included, maybe some Arab countries, because
so first you need the dispute to die down, and then a territorial dispute.
Well, basically, you de-escalate. You take, so that it doesn't get into further deterioration or further explosion. For example, I understand there is talk right now about having the period between 20th of December till the 15th of January, which would have all the holidays, Christmas and New Year's for both religions, for all religions, different Christian. Sects, exactly. So then, if there is a break, if they all agree to this break, that's a bit of a breather for everybody, because we are now in what is referred to as a position war. Position war, both parties are stuck. They cannot advance enough, as it looks. and the dangers of this war to destroy further the infrastructure. These are new types of wars. We have the technology that aims at destroying the infrastructure. So back to the point. The point is that if you succeed at this sort of temporary ceasefire, while you discuss ways of the security guarantees, I understand there is a formula, maybe people in Turkey know about it in the policy-making spheres, that maybe they could explore the formula of absolutely stipulating that these are Ukrainian territories, but for those territories that are under the Russian influence now, control, that it will be under, for transitionally under Russian control, transitionally only. So you play around with the territorial issue in order to resolve it eventually, but not now. Otherwise, there is no way you're moving forward. If you start with a territorial dispute, you cannot go anywhere. If you start with measures that can calm down the situation, maybe eventually, you could discuss the territorial conflict.
I mean, do you agree with Raghida? I mean, do you feel that that approach to the conflict in Ukraine, Russia, is a viable one in terms of how we get this war to die down?
Certainly, Turkey's approach is very constructive in dealing with this crisis. But of course, there is a great power competition side to this crisis. So we have to consider this at all different levels. After this pandemic and actually Ukrainian crisis, we have seen that the international institutions are not effective. They are not able to resolve these conflicts. So we need a new leadership, new initiatives. And President Erdogan was the person who can take this initiative because of the reasons that I mentioned before. His expertise, his 20 years of experience, and his some communication skills, and his courage by addressing the global issues, including the UN reform issue. When there is a conflict between a country that is a member of UN Security Council and another country, you cannot solve this by international institutions. What are the options? You will force two sides for peace. You will try to persuade them. Of course, the conflict is now continuing, but Turkey, by taking this initiative, established somehow a ground for making this grain deal, exchange of prisoners, and again security of Zaporizhzhia
nuclear power plant
reactor. And these are some steps, but of course they are not enough to reach a solution or ceasefire first. President Erdogan calls for other leaders to do the same, to force both sides in a positive way, constructively for peace. If you take a side, this will limit your effect in persuading the parties. But that doesn't mean that Turkey is neutral here. Turkey actively supports Ukrainian territorial sovereignty, and even giving some help to do this.
Yes.
But at the same time, Turkey is maintaining good relationship with Russia to reach some solutions. And this is a new way of diplomacy, and actually that was accomplished by the uncertainties of the new coming world. And I hope that in the future there will be more opportunities for other leaders to do similar things in a very constructive way. We have to create this kind of new initiatives.
One of the most memorable sound bites, at least for me, of President Erdogan is, I think it's about a decade old, when he says the world is bigger than five. You talked about UN reform. I'm wondering if the success that Turkey has been able to show in terms of bringing together, being the main architect of this Black Sea grain corridor deal, do you think it has aided, or how much do you think it has aided in terms of gaining momentum, bringing attention to UN reform? UN reform.
Yeah, I see some other leaders, they have started to talk about the need for the reform of UN system. This is inevitable, actually, because this idea of multilateralism should be revived in a new way. What do I mean by that? You know, we were living in the world of liberal world order, and that was dominated by the US. But now the world is passing to a new phase that we can call it multipolarism. And in this world, we see that the US doesn't want to lead the leadership and actually pay the cost for it. So we have to create new initiatives from different countries. And this idea of reforming UN system is inevitable. But at the same time, there is a reality of new power relationship among the countries. You cannot omit some rising countries, some regional countries like Turkey. And at the same time, Turkey gives an example of how autonomous foreign policy could help for the betterment of the conflicts. So this is an example even to be draw some lessons. And I see that some regional countries after this Ukrainian crisis, they are making similar foreign policy choices. And this is something positive. But the destiny that we should strive for is, of course, to have a new order based on multilateralism and maybe a new UN system. And the last word, President Erdogan actually is the first forerunner of this idea of reforming.
Raghida, I want to ask you about UN reform,
Yes.
bravery, because it's not
Yes,
really the main
yes,
topic.
yes.
Let me take a wild guess.
Yeah.
You don't think it's possible?
Yeah, but of course not. Look, I mean, I covered the United Nations for a good 30 years. So, I'm the child of the United Nations, so I know how it is. I think it's particularly now, I mean, one of the permanent members of the Security Council, Russia, is being nullified, and it's being cancelled out. It's cancelling itself out, probably, unfortunately. But the point is that, this is a huge, cumbersome bureaucracy, and where countries are going to be competing for the shape of the new world order, with particularly big powers, take China and the United States. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that the United States will lead the new world order, will continue to lead it. China will be important in multiple ways. Obviously, the Belt and Road Initiative, its own look at itself, but I don't think we should really over-glorify what is in reality, a real different weight between China and the United States. I think and I am an American, so for those who are going to say,
yes, I am.
So I'm an American citizen. For those who are going to say, oh,
dual citizen.
Yes, both dual citizen. The point is that I think also I want to get to a point, and I appreciate very much the pride you have in Turkey's role in the region, and it is to be absolutely complimented, no doubt about that. But I think Turkey has got to be careful in its regional performance. I'm talking about Syria in particular. I understand the security concerns, national security concerns of Turkey, absolutely respect that premise. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's healthy to find a solution for that through the belt, through the security belt in the Syrian territory. I think as a principle, that's not really a very commendable approach, because, and it's number two, because Turkey also has taken pride in being the facilitator of negotiations amongst different people.
I'm sorry, I have to interject. Let me ask you, Turkey is not dealing with another state, it's dealing with non-state actors. So how do you
but in
deal...
another state's territory. You do not, I mean, I don't think it's permissible, but Turkey has problems with, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Turkey has problems with Russia, with Iran, with, of course, the PKK. That's a completely different dimension. But Syria, despite Bashar al-Assad, remains a Syrian country. The territory of Syria is not the territory of Bashar al-Assad. He can kill his people and commit genocide day in, day out, but it's not going to be his father's territory.
This is going to be a
so
whole
what I'm trying to say to you, because I know I touched on very sensitive points here.
No, it's not that. I think it's important to lay out the facts,
What I want
though.
to propose to you is, just as Turkey and the Turkish leadership is very strong in bringing the conflict resolution, to be a pioneer in conflict resolution, in innovative ways for conflict resolution, I think it should explore this one.
Okay, Raghida.
Rather than say security belt militarily in Syrian territory, no matter what.
Okay. Toivo, I'm going to give you the last word to sort of bring everything together. We talked about the need for new leadership. Burhan Timeh was talking about that. We need new initiatives. Talk to us about how various dialogue platforms can be strengthened, should be strengthened, in terms of increasing the prospects for conflict resolution and peace building.
That's a huge question. I'm not sure that I am qualified to answer that in its entirety. But I think, on one thing that has been mentioned here, Ukraine, I think, and more generally, the important thing for this new world order that we're talking about is, I believe for all of us who are living in this world, is that might makes right cannot be the principle. And in this particular case, in the Ukraine case, it's about Russia attacking Ukraine, and that cannot stand. That is why the European Union has taken this principal position of providing assistance to Ukraine to give it the means to defend itself. And in the more general context, we need to, what I started with, we need to focus on the people, on the populations, and on changing mindsets. And that is a work that is not easy, but it requires genuine leadership from different political leaders, that it's not enough to work on texts, it's not enough to work on agreements, but it is important to guide your people and to really change mindsets. If I again look at the region that I know best in this context, the South Caucasus, it's not going to be resolved. Yes, we can take very important steps by signing important documents, but for a sustainable peace, you need to work and make sure that the populations come along. And in that sense, that is to me something that is undervalued, that is not paid enough attention to. We have a lot of focus on sort of these top-level meetings, but and we experienced that in Europe. I mean, after the First World War, we had a peace treaty that was perceived as being unjust, that became a key element for what we got next, the Second World War.
Yeah.
So unless you really take a different approach to peacemaking and try to have a peace that is perceived as equitable, not just between two leaders, but across the populations, they will inevitably lead to new conflicts, and that is what we really have to work on.
I think it's a very good sum up. Toivo, thank you very much. Burhan Erdogan. And last but not least, Raghida Dergham, thank you very much for joining me. We're going to talk afterwards.